In the heart of a bustling African city, where ambition clashed with morality and wealth spoke louder than wisdom, one man's name echoed through every street corner, every marketplace, every gathering. Chucky Wirewire. A name that made women dance, men bow, and the poor scramble in the dust for his leftover naira notes. But behind the designer clothes, the convoy of luxury cars, and the mountains of cash lay a darkness so profound that even the bravest souls whispered about it only in shadows. This is not just a story of wealth. It is a tale of blood money, betrayal, and the inevitable justice that waits patiently for those who believe they are untouchable. Sit back and discover what happens when a man sells his soul for temporary glory. Nobody called him Chuka anymore. Not his childhood friends, not his family, not even his mother. The name had been swallowed whole by his nickname, Chucky Wirewire, a title he wore like a crown of thorns disguised as gold. In Anugu, his name was louder than the morning market bells, more commanding than the town criers of old. Every time someone shouted his nickname, Chucky would puff out his broad chest, flash his perfectly white teeth, and deliver his signature line with the confidence of a king addressing his subjects, "Money na water." The response was always the same. Women giggled and swayed their hips, men nodded with forced respect mixed with envy, and young boys stared with stars in their eyes, dreaming of the day they too could spray money like rain. Chucky was everything people in Anugu desired but could never achieve. Tall, dark-skinned, and muscular, he moved through the city like a god among mortals. His clothes were imported from Milan, Paris, and Dubai. His shoes gleamed brighter than the afternoon sun. His cologne lingered in the air long after he had left, a reminder that greatness had passed through. His fleet of cars, Bentleys, Range Rovers, and Lamborghinis, roared through the narrow streets like mechanical lions claiming their territory. To the untrained eye, Chucky Wirewire was the perfect picture of success. A self-made man who had conquered life and bent fortune to his will. But to the elders who had lived long enough to recognize patterns, something was deeply wrong. No legitimate business. No office. No visible trade. Yet the money flowed endlessly, like water from an inexhaustible well. Young men idolized him with religious fervor. They studied his walk, memorized his phrases, and begged to be part of his circle. To them, he was proof that poverty was a choice and that wealth was just one bold move away. But the elders shook their gray heads in silent disapproval. They had seen this before. Money that appears from nowhere always has roots in darkness. Still, nobody dared confront him. His wealth had become his armor, and in a society that worshipped money above morality, Chucky Wirewire was untouchable. Or so everyone believed. Chucky's wealth was not a blessing to his community. It was a weapon he used to humiliate and entertain himself at the expense of the struggling masses. His presence at weddings, parties, and social gatherings was always theatrical. He would arrive with sirens blaring, his convoy blocking traffic, forcing everyone to stop and acknowledge his arrival. At weddings, he sprayed bundles of crisp naira notes on brides until the floor was carpeted with money. The guests would abandon all dignity, scrambling on their hands and knees, tearing at each other's clothes just to grab a few notes. Chucky would stand above them, laughing like a man watching trained monkeys perform tricks. "Money na water," he would shout, and the crowd would echo his words like a hypnotized congregation. In nightclubs, his extravagance reached absurd levels. He would order 30 bottles of the most expensive champagne, pop them open, and pour the golden liquid onto the floor just to watch it pool and waste. His friends clapped. His admirers screamed his name. The DJ would pause the music to acknowledge the great Chucky Wirewire, and he would bask in the attention like a king receiving tribute. But when real need knocked on his door, Chucky's heart turned to stone. A widow once came to him, her eyes red from crying, her voice trembling as she begged for help to pay her son's school fees. Chucky looked at her with cold contempt, waved her away like an annoying fly, and said, "Do you think money grows on trees? Go and hustle. Money is not for lazy people." That same night, he went to a club and threw 50,000 naira into the air just to watch hungry people fight over it. To him, helping someone solve a genuine problem was foolishness, but watching the poor degrade themselves for his amusement was entertainment worth every kobo. The community talked behind his back, but nobody could resist the magnetic pull of his wealth. Politicians invited him to their private dinners. Pastors reserved front-row seats for him in church and prayed for his continued prosperity. Musicians composed songs with his name woven into the lyrics. Money had bought him respect, even when his arrogance bruised every soul around him. Yet beneath the surface, a question lingered like smoke that refused to dissipate: what exactly does Chucky Wirewire do for a living? That question, whispered in beer parlors and marketplaces, would one day explode like a bomb that had been ticking quietly for years. Chucky's mansion was the crown jewel of Anugu. 3 stories high, with marble floors imported from Italy, golden staircases that spiraled like something out of a fantasy, and chandeliers that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The swimming pool was Olympic-sized, surrounded by imported palm trees and sculptures that looked like they belonged in a museum. Every weekend, the gates opened wide for parties that became the talk of the town. Girls in skimpy outfits danced by the poolside. Alcohol flowed freely. Music blasted from speakers powerful enough to shake the neighbors' windows. To outsiders looking in, it was paradise, a glimpse into a life most could only dream of. But to those who worked inside the mansion, it was a prison built on fear. The staff, cooks, cleaners, gardeners, and drivers, moved through the halls like ghosts, eyes lowered, mouths sealed. They had learned never to ask questions. Never to look too closely. Never to speak about the things they saw. They cleaned blood stains from floors without asking where the blood came from. They carried heavy, suspiciously shaped bags into the basement without daring to peek inside. They watched guests arrive at midnight but never saw those same guests leave in the morning. They heard muffled screams and cries echoing from below but convinced themselves it was just the television or their imagination playing tricks. Chucky's money silenced both their mouths and their consciences. The salary was too good to risk. The threat was too real to ignore. One of his drivers, a man named Okafor, once confided in a close friend over bottles of beer one humid night. His voice dropped to a whisper, his eyes darting around nervously as if Chucky's spies were everywhere. "That man is not ordinary," Okafor said, his hands trembling as he gripped his bottle. "I have driven him to strange places in the dead of night. Villages nobody has heard of. Abandoned buildings in the middle of nowhere. I have seen things I cannot explain. Things that make my blood run cold." His friend laughed nervously, dismissing the claim as jealousy or drunken exaggeration. But deep down, Okafor knew what he had witnessed was real. The wealth that dazzled Anugu came with shadows, dark, dangerous, and hungry shadows that fed on human lives. Though Chucky believed his secrets were buried too deep to ever resurface, fate was already sharpening its blade, preparing for the day when the truth would claw its way out of the grave. Market days in Anugu were transformed into theatrical performances whenever Chucky Wirewire decided to make an appearance. He would arrive like a head of state, his convoy of cars stretching down the narrow roads, sirens blaring unnecessarily, forcing traders and shoppers to abandon their business and rush to see the spectacle. Children screamed his name with the enthusiasm of fans at a concert. Women danced and sang praises. Men stood in silent awe, their hearts a mixture of admiration and bitter envy. Chucky would step out of his car dressed in an expensive Italian suit, gold chains thick as ropes hanging around his neck, and a diamond wristwatch that could blind anyone who stared too long. Then came the moment everyone waited for. With a wicked smile that revealed both his arrogance and his contempt, Chucky would reach into a bag and fling bundles of naira notes into the air. The money rained down like leaves falling from trees in Harmattan, and chaos would erupt instantly. Market women, some old enough to be his grandmother, would scramble on the dusty ground, fighting, clawing, and tearing each other's clothes just to grab a single note. Chucky would stand above them, clapping his hands like a child watching a circus act, laughing until tears ran down his cheeks. "Money na water," he shouted, and his security guards pushed people aside to clear a path for their boss, but not everyone was entertained. A widow selling tomatoes at the corner of the market stared at him with tears streaming down her weathered face. Just a week earlier, she had gone to his mansion and begged him for help to send her son to school. Chucky had insulted her, called her lazy, and driven her away with harsh words and laughter. Now, she watched him throw away millions just to mock hungry people, and she whispered under her breath, "God is watching." But her voice was lost in the noise of the crowd, swallowed by the cheers and chaos that Chucky thrived on. In every corner of the city, debates about Chucky Wirewire raged like wildfire. At beer parlors, men argued passionately late into the night. "I'm telling you, that man is a fraudster. Nobody gets money like that without business. No, he's a big-time businessman. He imports goods from abroad. You're lying. If he was doing business, we would know his office. Where is his shop? Where are his workers? Forget all that. The man is just blessed. Not everybody's story is the same. Maybe his ancestors gave him riches." The debates never ended, and the truth remained hidden. Chucky himself loved the mystery. He fueled it with coded statements and cryptic smiles. "Money doesn't come from sweat," he would say at events. "It comes from sense." People clapped without understanding. Nobody dared to dig deeper. But the suspicion in the eyes of the wise grew sharper with each passing day. One humid night, the music in Chucky's mansion stopped abruptly. The girls who had been dancing provocatively by the poolside screamed and ran when strange noises echoed from the basement. It was not the usual sound of music or laughter. It was the unmistakable sound of someone crying, someone begging desperately for mercy. The guards quickly locked all the doors, ushered the guests out through side exits, and pretended nothing had happened. But rumors, like smoke, cannot be contained forever. Within days, whispers spread through Anugu like wildfire. A cook swore she had seen a young man chained in the basement during one of her late-night shifts. A gardener whispered to his wife that some of Chucky's visitors never returned home, their families left searching for them in vain. Then one night, Okafor, the driver, came home trembling so violently that his wife thought he was having a seizure. She asked him what was wrong, but he couldn't speak. Only later, in the suffocating darkness of their bedroom, did he finally whisper the truth that had been choking him. "I cannot continue like this," Okafor said, his voice breaking. "That man is evil. I saw him with my own eyes delivering human parts in a black bag. I drove him there myself. I am his driver, and I helped him carry death." His wife covered her mouth in horror, her hands shaking. "Okafor, don't ever say this outside," she begged. "He will kill us. He will kill our children." But secrets are like smoke. They seep through every crack, every window, every whispered conversation. That night marked the first visible crack in Chucky's kingdom of wealth. A kingdom built on blood can never stand forever. The clock was ticking, and his downfall was closer than anyone, including Chucky himself, could have imagined. The moon hung full and heavy in the sky, casting long shadows over Anugu. While the city slept, Chucky's mansion buzzed with sinister activity. Deep in the basement, a young man no older than 20 sat chained to a rusty iron pole, his voice hoarse from days of screaming. His tears had dried on his dirt-stained cheeks. Nobody had come to rescue him. Nobody even knew he was there. Upstairs, the party raged on. Music blasted from expensive speakers. Laughter mixed with the clinking of champagne glasses. Chucky sat in his throne-like chair, surrounded by admirers, smoking expensive cigars and basking in the false worship of people who feared him more than they respected him. That night, mysterious visitors arrived. They didn't come in flashy cars with blaring sirens. They slipped into the mansion like shadows, men in expensive suits whose faces remained hidden in darkness. They were politicians, powerful figures who shared Chucky's dark trade. They didn't come for entertainment. They came for business. Hours later, Chucky's guards carried black nylon bags out to a tinted SUV parked in the shadows. Neighbors peeked through their curtains from a safe distance, but nobody dared question what they saw. Fear had silenced an entire community. But unknown to Chucky, one of his staff members, the gardener, had filmed a short video on his small phone. Hiding behind a wall, his hands shaking so badly the footage came out blurry, he pressed record. His conscience had finally overpowered his fear. That shaky video would one day become the key to everything. Meanwhile, in the basement, something miraculous happened. While the guards were drunk and unconscious from a night of excessive partying, the chained boy noticed that one of the padlocks had not been properly secured. With trembling hands and prayers on his lips, he pulled and twisted until the chain loosened. For the first time in weeks, he was free. Barefoot and weak, moving like a ghost, he tiptoed past the snoring guards. His heart pounded so loudly he was certain someone would hear it. He crawled through the backyard, squeezed through a small drainage hole he had been studying for days, and emerged on the other side of the fence. The night was cold, but freedom burned hot in his chest. He ran through bushes, stumbled over stones, tore his flesh on barbed wires, but he didn't stop. Every step was powered by the desperate will to survive. He ran until dawn broke, until he reached a small village on the outskirts of Anugu. The villagers gathered around him when they saw his bruised body and the chains still hanging from his wrists like the remnants of a nightmare. "Who did this to you?" an old man asked, his voice filled with anger and pity. The boy, shivering and exhausted, whispered one name before collapsing: Chucky Wirewire. The village exploded with shock. The name that symbolized wealth and power had just been tied to blood and chains. And for the first time, people had proof, living, breathing proof, that the rumors were true. By the next day, the boy's story had traveled faster than cars, faster than radio waves, faster than any lie Chucky could have invented. The name Chucky Wirewire no longer carried admiration. It carried suspicion, fear, and disgust. People whispered in markets, in churches, on buses, in hair salons. "So it's true. That's how he makes his money. I always suspected. Money without business is never clean. How many innocent souls has he destroyed?" Politicians who once invited him to exclusive parties suddenly claimed they barely knew him. Pastors who gave him front-row seats stopped mentioning his name in prayers. Musicians who sang his praises quietly deleted those songs from their playlists. The same society that worshipped him now spat at the mention of his name. The authorities could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. The video from the gardener and the testimony of the escaped boy landed on the desk of the state commissioner of police. A secret investigation was launched immediately. Officers tapped Chucky's phones, followed his movements, traced his secret meetings, and interviewed his staff members who were willing to talk. The net was closing in, tighter and tighter with each passing day. But Chucky, blinded by his own arrogance, didn't notice the walls closing in. He was too busy shouting "money na water" at clubs, too busy throwing cash at the poor, too busy living in the delusion that his wealth made him untouchable. What he didn't realize was that the empire he had built on blood was already crumbling from within, and the ground beneath his golden shoes was cracking wide open. For the first time in years, Chucky couldn't sleep. His usually bold and arrogant heart was restless. Strange things had begun happening. Unmarked cars parked suspiciously close to his mansion. Men pretending to buy roasted corn but watching his gate too closely. Unknown numbers calling his phone and hanging up immediately when he answered. At first, he dismissed it all as jealousy from his enemies. But when one of his most trusted guards whispered that police officers had been asking questions in the neighborhood, Chucky's confident smile finally vanished. The investigation grew deeper and more organized. Police moved carefully, like hunters stalking a dangerous lion. They collected testimonies from families of missing persons. Mothers cried as they described the last time they saw their children, most of them last seen entering Chucky's mansion or his cars. The escaped boy, though still weak and traumatized, gave detailed descriptions of the basement, the chains, the screams, and even the politicians who visited at midnight. His words were like daggers piercing through Chucky's glittering facade. The leaked video from the gardener, though blurry, was clear enough. Black bags being loaded into vehicles. Chucky's face visible in the background, giving orders with casual cruelty. The evidence was mounting into an undeniable mountain. Chucky knew the walls were closing in. He began liquidating his wealth. Cars were secretly sold to foreign buyers. Gold was transferred to offshore accounts. Fake passports were arranged through his connections. He told his closest allies he was planning a holiday abroad, but everyone who knew him understood it was an escape plan. His biggest mistake was trusting too many people. One of his bodyguards, terrified of being arrested and facing life in prison, secretly became an informant for the police. Every detail of Chucky's escape plan, the flight date, the private jet, the secret airstrip, was reported directly to the authorities. On the outside, Chucky continued playing his role. He still went to clubs, still sprayed money, still shouted his famous catchphrase. But inside, panic was eating him alive. He knew he had to disappear before it was too late. What he didn't know was that the same people who once bowed at his feet were now waiting eagerly for the day he would fall. Chucky decided to throw one final, legendary party before vanishing forever. He wanted the entire city to remember him, to talk about his greatness for generations. Invitations spread like wildfire across Anugu. Musicians, dancers, politicians, businessmen, and women of all kinds filled his mansion for what would become his last hurrah. That night, the mansion glittered like a palace from a fairy tale. Fireworks exploded in the sky, painting it in bright colors. Champagne flowed endlessly. Girls danced wildly by the pool. Chucky, dressed in a golden agbada with diamond-studded shoes, sat like a king on his throne. But something was different. The smiles were thinner, the whispers louder. Some guests who once admired him avoided making eye contact. A few bold ones even mocked him quietly. Enjoy now. Your end is near. Blood money doesn't last. Chucky laughed loudly, trying to drown out his own fear. Deep inside, he knew this would be his last show. The police had been watching for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. The commissioner gave the final order: do not arrest him at his mansion. He is too guarded there. Catch him when he tries to escape. True to the plan, Chucky's private jet was scheduled to take off from a secret airstrip just outside the city. Police officers surrounded the area silently, hiding in the shadows with no sirens, no noise, only determination and justice waiting to be served. The night of his escape arrived. Chucky entered his black Range Rover, accompanied by a few loyal guards. For once, he wore a dark hoodie instead of his flamboyant outfits. He didn't want attention. He wanted silence and invisibility. As the convoy approached the airstrip, Chucky smiled to himself. Fools. They can't touch me. By tomorrow, I'll be in Dubai, and from there, Europe. Let them talk. Money na water. But just as he stepped out of the car and approached the waiting jet, blinding floodlights switched on from every direction. Armed police officers surrounded the airstrip like an iron cage. Chuka Aero, you are under arrest. The words hit him like a thunderbolt. His guards immediately dropped their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Chucky froze, his legs suddenly weak, his mouth dry. Handcuffs clicked on his wrists, the same way chains once held his victims. The man who mocked the poor, who laughed at widows, who shouted, "Money na water," with such arrogance, now had his face pressed into the dust. The fall of Chucky Wirewire was complete. Morning broke, and the news spread like wildfire across every corner of Nigeria. Chucky Wirewire arrested. By noon, crowds filled the streets around the police station, desperate to confirm with their own eyes that the untouchable had finally been touched. The man who once commanded respect was now paraded before cameras, handcuffed like a common criminal. Crowds gathered, shouting, spitting, cursing. Women threw sand in anger. Men shook their fists. Mothers of the missing wept uncontrollably, screaming his name with bitterness. "Chucky, where is my son? Return my daughter." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. People who once admired him now filled every seat to watch his disgrace. The charges were read: kidnapping, murder, human trafficking, and ritual killings. Each word struck like thunder in the silent hall. Witnesses took the stand one by one. The escaped boy described the basement horrors. Mothers held up photos of their missing children and wept openly. The gardener's video played on a large screen, and gasps filled the hall as people saw the truth they had always suspected. Chucky's allies abandoned him one by one. Politicians denied ever knowing him. His friends vanished like smoke. Even his guards turned witnesses to save themselves. When the judge delivered the sentence, death by hanging, cries of relief and justice filled the courtroom. Chucky collapsed on his knees, his face buried in his hands. The empire he built on blood had fallen completely. Days later, newspapers screamed, "Chucky Wirewire executed." His mansion was seized. His cars were auctioned. Everything he bragged about was stripped away. His name, once shouted in admiration, was now whispered in disgust, a warning to future generations. The greatest wound, however, was not to his name but to the memory of the lives he destroyed. Families still carried their pain. Widows still mourned. Children still cried at night for parents who would never return. And so his story ended not in glory but in disgrace, a stark reminder that money without mercy is poison, that wealth built on blood is a curse, and that pride always walks hand in hand with destruction. For those who once idolized him, the lesson was painfully clear: money na water, yes, but life is blood. And when you trade blood for money, the water will drown you. True wealth is not measured by the money you gain through blood, deceit, or the suffering of others. Real prosperity comes from touching lives with kindness, building with honesty, and living with integrity. No matter how long evil hides in the shadows, truth will always rise to the surface. Every person must eventually reap exactly what they have sown. The path of wickedness may seem profitable for a season, but its end is always destruction, shame, and regret. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this powerful story. If this tale touched your heart or opened your eyes to the consequences of greed and wickedness, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your family and friends. They need to hear this message too. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another incredible story. We have many more life-changing tales coming your way, stories that will inspire you, challenge you, and remind you of what truly matters in life. Your support means everything to us. Subscribe now, and we'll see you in the next story. Until then, choose wisdom over wealth, character over cash, and integrity over influence. See you.